Welcome to the Parks and Cons Con Talk, where we bring you news from the very best in pop culture conventions around and take you to the heart of the floor of some of those conventions. I'm Carmel, and this is my co-host Sean.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. We are going to be talking about a bunch of fun things today. It'll be a little bit Comic-Con International centric, as we're going to talk about WonderCon, going under the con there, as well as talking some SDCC. But we are very much glad to have you back. So let's go ahead and get right into the news with our segment we call Coming to a Con Near You. And this is where we take 3 or 4 pieces of news from the convention world that we find interesting. Always understand it's not a comprehensive list of all the news from the last couple weeks, but it's just some of the things that pertain to us or things that we find most interesting. Always feel free to jump in the comments section to provide tips, comments of your own news that you think is important to talk about, and that way we can consider it for future shows. So what do we have up first?
Okay, first up, we start with a topic that has gotten a lot of attention over the last few weeks as a potential precursor to the big SDCC change. What are your thoughts on the RFID system at this year's San Diego Comic-Con?
So Silicon Valley Comic-Con, WonderCon, you'll hear it in our Under the Con segment. We talk more about RFID. That is kind of a change coming down the line, really, I think, for all larger scale conventions, at least in the pop culture realm, which obviously is what we talk about here. So it does seem like a likely change. We've noted with Silicon Valley, and then we'll talk about WonderCon, some of the issues with it. When I was down in San Diego this last week and was doing some Periscope and just doing some preview type stuff around the convention center, and that was like one of the #1 questions that people asked on Periscope about the RFID, how does it impact? And the thing that I've been pretty consistent about saying, I think since even back in talking about in the old days with New York Comic Con, is the idea that obviously it's to cut down on counterfeiting, which at the end will bring less people onto the floor that are counterfeiting and shouldn't be there. If you present it that way, I think it's something that people will buy into and be okay with. At Silicon Valley, where they tried to sell it as something that speeds up the process of getting in, I don't think that's the right way to go with it, because it clearly doesn't do that. You know, the comment by Steve Wozniak that it's, you know, no more of this slowing down, having to turn your badge around. You know, instead it's like, well, now you got to wait in line and tap something, and then if the RFID goes dead, you've got to go somewhere else. So I do think it's going to be a bottleneck at many places. Hopefully they have it set up, because it's not as disjointed of a place as the LA Convention Center. Hopefully at San Diego it'll be set up where it's some of those major arteries outside of the convention center. But obviously, as big as the lines are, you know, there's a big risk of having people lined up like throughout the gas lamp trying to get in there with the RFIDs. I think the biggest problem with the RFID is simply when they go bad, which it just happens. They cut out. We've seen it numerous times, and now you have to go to another part of the convention center for help desk. So hopefully they will have numerous help desks, numerous RFID stations, an overwhelming amount of support there, so that if you are at Hall A or Hall H, either end of the convention center, if your badge isn't going right, you don't have to walk all the way to the other side, because obviously there's nothing more important than time at Comic-Con, and I think that is the risk there. So you've had 2 trips around with the RFID as well. What are your thoughts?
Well, I definitely liked the tap-in system that CCI used at WonderCon more than the Silicon Valley one. Silicon Valley, it was the wristbands that you had to wear the entire time, so several days wearing the same thing, which is just, I'm never a fan of, because that's just kind of gross. I mean, granted, they were plastic, but still. And then the system that they had were like iPads or whatever that you had to pretty much physically touch for it to go off. And then there had to be the other person, the staff member, volunteer on the other side to let you know if it went through or not. That was very time consuming. This one at the Los Angeles Convention Center for WonderCon was a much quicker, just quick tap. There weren't people, there was security there, but they were just watching the lights, and it just very clearly went either green or red. I never saw a red myself because mine always worked, fortunately, but I would have been very frustrating if it at any point didn't work. And then obviously there were those days that people were having more issues, but hopefully CCI clears up those bugs before it's implemented in San Diego. And people complained about the height of the little tower station that you tapped on, because people had to bend over to pretty much touch it. So obviously retractable lanyards would work. But for me at my height, it was very perfect. I'm super short. If you can't tell in the video, I'm not even 5 feet. So it was really easy for me. It was just my perfect height, and I just held it out and it tapped in very easily. So once that system, by Saturday, that there seem to be a lot fewer issues with that, with the RFID. So if San Diego can start on the Saturday way it went for WonderCon, then that'll help. But agreed, having those issues when you've waited in line for hours and hours, if not days, and then to get to the door and not be able to get in,
Yep.
would be devastating. I mean, it would just ruin the entire con, I think, for a lot of people.
Right.
So,
and for those that are really trying for panels or exclusives that are like the high, caliber stuff, the difference of 30 seconds can make or break an entire day, let alone a half hour because you have to go walk around, or 5 minutes even if they are. I mean, at the end of the day, if you camp out for Hall H or Ballroom 20 or the Hasbro line, and when they start to usher people in, you're stuck out, even if it's a minute delay, that could be too much. So again, hopefully the system will be set up where they are able to have you scan in before the buzzer, before everybody's herding into that one big moment. But if we think about it, just something like Hall H, let's say, you've got the lines outside. Are they going to have people tap in before they get into that queue? Obviously, there's such a large, expansive area there. There's no way really to control that people won't just duck under ropes and stuff. So it seems very likely that you'll tap in as you go in through that main door. Now, hopefully they'll start that maybe then a half hour earlier or an hour earlier. And if you get stuck because your badge isn't working, they'll stop right there and not let anybody past you.
wow.
But I think that that's asking a lot, and it's unlikely. And we'll see. The thing I think about any new convention implementations is the conventions are never going to implement something for a negative reason. They're always doing it to try and better their way of handling things, the experience for fans. And it may be more on one side than the other for sure. I mean, in the case of this, obviously cutting out counterfeiters saves them a lot of money or, resources that aren't going out. But at the same time,
if it clears up the floor from a lot of people who aren't supposed to be there, then that could be
well, and the
beneficial
big
on our
question
end.
that people ask is how big of a problem is counterfeiting badges? And the answer to that from us, we don't know. I mean, we don't know. Is it hundreds? Is it 50? Is it 5,000? I got to think it's pretty substantial, though, that they are, going to this system. So we'll see. Much like, at parks, there's always new policies being implemented. And sometimes it takes a year to really know if it works. So the convention, I mean, I don't think that it will go off without a hitch, just like it didn't go off without a hitch at Silicon Valley or WonderCon. Regardless of how many times you've done it at any other convention, San Diego is a whole different animal. Convention center layout is different. Everything's different. So, again, we talk about pack your patience, see what happens, and then hope for as few technical glitches as possible.
Yeah, I don't know how logistically it would work, and obviously, I assume they're paying someone to analyze it and get it set up as well as possible, but it would be great if all we had to do was scan in and out once we went in the main doors and then could roam all over the convention center freely. But that just doesn't seem all that likely of a thing. I mean, even to get to the escalators to go up to register, there are some parts there where if security's not watching, people are going to be crawling under or whatever. So it definitely wouldn't be a perfect system, but that would make it at least less stressful once you got in the doors.
Right. And so you guys know, I mean, I talked about when I was out in San Diego on Thursday, we're doing the visual guides again. We'll talk about all sorts of tips, but beware, this could really alter some things, and we probably won't have all this information until preview night and beyond. So we'll set up the visual guides as best we can, as we always do, but as we always say, you got to be ready for all sorts of dynamic things to occur, and this could be one of them. So, all right, what's up next?
So up next, D23 announced their 2017 dates for their expo, for the D23 Expo, which puts it just a few days before San Diego, although San Diego hasn't officially announced their dates. The way it looks on the convention schedule is that it's just a few days before Comic-Con. So what do you think of the bold move of D23 to put itself right up against Comic-Con?
Well, as you said, first off, it's important to note that Comic-Con International has not announced their dates, but the San Diego Convention Center has announced that there's a convention with 130,000 people there. So we can read the tea leaves, and that's San Diego Comic-Con. It would seem that D23 moving to this spot is just all about flexibility. I mean, it really gives them, it puts them in a real power position. They're in a really unique spot. They own all of their toys. They don't have to ask for anybody to come out. They, at the end, are in charge of everything that will be presented there. We know from the press side of covering D23, they are really big on controlling their message. They want just their video, just their photos. They don't want, crappy cell phone video from the 20th row or the 50th row or the 100th row. They really are big on putting together a package and controlling that. And this allows them to do that, because one of the things about San Diego is that doesn't happen. It's not the same. You're playing on someone else's field. The other thing about San Diego is that we've seen is a lot of footage has leaked over the years. And I don't think that that's at all part of this decision process, but you've got to consider that's maybe a bit of a pain for them. Is every year footage leaks from San Diego Comic-Con from various screenings, or various footage. That doesn't really happen at D23. They have a system that works really well. I wish anybody that didn't want footage to leak should just use that system in terms of how they work with the phones. That said, I way rather have my phone in control. At D23, they have you basically put them in a Ziploc bag and you keep them, and they've got great security all over with night vision goggles, and it just doesn't happen. So that could be part of it, but I think at the end, I don't think it's anything as sophisticated as that. I really think it's about flexibility, and it's about being right before San Diego. If they want to have Star Wars at both, they can. If they want to scoop it and have everything at D23, they can. If they want to keep the celebs at D23, do some promo at Disneyland for a couple days, then come down to San Diego, they can. It's just, I don't think that there's any way that they've even decided what the plan is for all of those little pieces. It's just they have the flexibility to be in a power position then by being that week before. It was cool. If KPCC, they asked me, public radio, to do a little interview with them, and that was kind of the point that kept coming back to, was that idea about, it's about putting them at the heart of the control. And we've found it on small scale things with media stuff, and big scale things is just Disney is a control freak as a company with it. And obviously it works. I mean, it's an amazing company that's built all sorts of, empires, but this gives them maximum control. And I don't know that there's a single plan, or maybe everything's planned out, but I think that's really what it's about, is it's about flexibility and control.
That makes sense. I mean, as soon as I heard the dates and realized that they were that close to each other, I instantly felt it's just stress, just kind of, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We're fortunate in that we live in Southern California, so we will be able to maneuver things to be able to go to both. Right. But by the end of, we're already tired by the end of either of those conventions, and combining them practically into one, because basically the day that D23 is going to end, that's a Sunday. Usually that Monday before Comic-Con, we're already heading down to San Diego to start covering stuff. And it's just...
Yeah, I mean, it's toughest for press, but, when you look at attendees in large, I mean, for a lot of attendees, they can go, and do their, finish out Sunday at D23, go back to work for 3 days, and then go. Not that it's ideal, but I do think, and not that Disney cares about that either. I mean, obviously, they'll sell their tickets either way if you choose. And this might be a thing, too, is one of the questions they asked on KPCC is how much overlap is there? And I don't think there's any data where we know, but what you and I know for sure is that overlap is growing exponentially each year. Just anecdotally, we know more and more people that were blowing off D23 Expo when we first started going are now like it's a mandatory thing, because they want to see what Star Wars and Marvel are going to bring. Not to mention, Pixar and all the animation stuff as well. So it'll be an interesting 2017. I think my comment on Twitter was just that we've got like 100 conventions probably before then, so I can't. It's very theoretical right now, even though the dates are pretty much in cement. It's like I can't even begin to think about them yet, because we're so far off from them, really.
Yeah, I mean, because we do so many, we're usually practically planning on the drive to them, what we're doing for each convention. And fortunately, we have enough practice that we can do that. Right. But yeah, I mean, that's really far off. But as we know, San Diego stuff starts really early, and so we will be starting to stress it around this time next year, since actually the next topic on our news is that there's a lot of stress for many con goers this month, as the San Diego Comic-Con hotel and parking lotteries are coming up. So like I said, this time next year we'll be going through this. What do you think of the movement towards lotteries? Because the hotels weren't. This is the first year it's going to be a lottery system.
Right.
So
Well, it's funny because we wrote this script of like what our news. We always write the news points really about a week and a half or so out, and then they maybe change as other news stories come up and bump them or whatever. But we had been talking about that as just April is all about stress for con goers. For many people, hotels is more stressful than even getting a ticket. For us, parking is equally stressful to the getting of the ticket. And so we were talking about that. And then as an April Fool's post, the SDCC blog, unofficial blog, did a post about everything being lotteries, going to the bathroom being a lottery, and just kind of things that Comic-Con just moved to that. But it's funny because in general, though, you do kind of feel that that's where things are going. And so to me, whether it's looking at tickets, parking, or hotels, the thing that's next is panels. And will that ever happen? I don't know. But I could very well imagine an SDCC 2017, 2018, where a month before, a week before, 2 days before, you go online, you register for the panels you want to get into, and you're informed, Wednesday morning, whether you got in or not. You go pick up a ticket, you show your barcode on your phone, whatever, and you get into Hall H now, or you get into Ballroom 20. We don't know if that happened. As you know, I think as people have followed along with us for a while know, I'm against any sort of lottery. I just am not a fan of lotteries at all. I would always rather try my chances where there's just, even if it's a tiny bit of skill. I remember when the tickets for registrations, and that's before you were press, and I've always said I don't like that system, and people are like, well, it's not fair if you have better technology that it went through faster, or better internet it went through faster, or you had. But to me, I prefer that system where if you put in a little bit of effort or a lot of effort, you might be able to get a little something extra. So I'm not a fan of the lottery system for hotels or for parking or for tickets for sure. But at the same time, I understand it. I totally see where they're going with it, and I don't think that this is the end of it.
yeah, I'm still processing that change too. We generally don't stay in the gas lamp. We prefer to, for us, because we are at the con so much of the day and all the days, we prefer to have our car at the convention center. So even if we were staying at the Omni just across the street, we've talked about it, we would still try for the parking under the convention center, because that crossing that street in the middle of Saturday just is not a effective use of time. So we don't generally have the same amount of stress as our friends do who want to stay in the gas lamp, but they are friends, and so doing this lottery system and setting up teams and stuff, that instantly increases the stress level and wanting to help, but also worrying about ourselves. And yeah, we'll have to figure that out, and I'm sure we'll discuss how things go on the next one.
Yeah, I mean, totally empathize with anybody that needs, quote unquote, a room at the gas lamp, because I feel like we need to park into the convention center. And if this year the parking lottery comes back and we're 5 blocks from the convention center, I'm going to feel like Comic-Con's ruined for a minute. I mean, and obviously it's all perspective, and you get down there and we've had, some pretty rough things happen at Comic-Con before, and you put in perspective and you're like, it's not, it's all of these are first world problems. All of these are luxury problems for sure. But that said, Comic-Con ends up being a hefty part of a lot of people's vacation, whether it's the time off from work or the money to go down there. We've heard a number of people, because they do want to stay in the gas lamp, talk about, that staying at San Diego Comic-Con is like a trip to Japan for some people, and for you and I staying on the outskirts, it's a much cheaper trip in general. But
for the hotel rooms.
For the hotel, yeah, but totally understand that, sentiment. And so we wish everyone luck. As this is airing, the lottery will have already completed. Will everybody have the results back? We'll see for sure. But obviously, best wishes to all, and we'll all be holding out for the parking too. And then we'll see what happens if there's any more lotteries. I mean, maybe this is the end of it, or maybe there's more around the corner. So.
Yeah,
and last story?
So last news item is that this Saturday, April 16th, Gallifrey One Doctor Who convention tickets go on sale. Big deal, or what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so April 16th, noon, Gallifrey One tickets go on sale. That has become more and more of a Comic-Con system each year. I mean, we've been going, 5 or so years now, and it went from it's just like San Diego. You could drive up there and get your ticket day of, to you need a little bit of planning, to you need a lot of planning, to the tickets are sold out in a minute or whatever it is. And so last year things crashed and everything else. So I would imagine it's going to be a ruthless system again this year. And with Gallifrey One, they don't do media passes really at all. So for that, we're always, we've always said if we don't get any Gallifrey One, we'll go cover another show because there's like 3 or 4 other great conventions always the same weekend. But we love Gallifrey One. I do think it's a big deal. I hope we get in. I don't want to ever be shut out of Gallifrey One. It was one of the, really it's one of my top 5 cons usually every year in terms of just that combination of entertainment, value, and relaxation all kind of rolling into it. So it is a big deal. Big deal to you?
Well, it's a big deal to us because we truly want to go, and we've gone and we know how enjoyable it is. But the fact that they cap their attendance at like 4,000 or less
under
than
4,
that, as a general to the whole world, it's probably not as big a deal as the hotel lotteries or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a big deal. Now, granted, as you said, I think next year Long Beach is going to Long Beach Expo.
Expo, same weekend.
Amazing Arizona is that same weekend. Strategicon is that same weekend. And then Gallifrey, and we just enjoy Gallifrey, so that's going to be the first choice, and hopefully we'll get in there. But yeah, those ticket sales within minutes they're sold out now, and because it's such a low number that they keep it at, and they do it deliberately. They could, and they know that they could expand if they wanted to, but they don't want to. It's a tight community of people who go to that, and I understand that it's their con and they can do with it what they want. But yeah, that'll be kind of stressful to try to get those tickets this year.
Well, if any questions about that, head over to Gallifrey1.com. It's a really simple system there. It's not anything like San Diego where there's some, you need a visual guide and things like that. But do head over to Gallifrey1.com, check it out, see if it's a con that interests you. They don't announce guests till much later in the year, so you're buying the tickets on faith. They always have a good set of guests there. It is really the center of the Doctor Who universe for that. And if you're watching this and you're a Doctor Who fan, you know all of that, whether you've been or not before. So good luck to you if you are trying for Gallifrey One tickets. So, all right, so now let's go ahead and go back in time. We are going to move back to WonderCon weekend, and we're staying out there at a little motel in LA, and that's where we're going to bring you Under the Con. Hey guys, welcome to this segment of our talk show here, what we call Under the Con. Under the Con is where we go underneath the hood of the convention to really talk about what makes it tick, share some of our observations, maybe some footage from the floor, and just kind of give you an overview of everything that was that convention, kind of a time capsule and a look forward to the following year or the following con. So this time we're going Under the Con at WonderCon Los Angeles. A little bit of a different year, being that WonderCon's been in Anaheim the last several years, and so we are out here actually at the Los Angeles Convention Center area covering the con. It's been a big 3 days full of action. We're going to take you to the floor, take you into some panel rooms, and show you a little bit of that. So first off though, going Under the Con, WonderCon is a 3-day convention. So it began Friday. It was a 12 to 7 in terms of the exhibit hall floor. Saturday 10 to 7, Sunday 10 to 5. Also lots of after hours programming that went to like midnight, I think pretty much all the nights.
11:50, yes.
Yeah, or not Sunday, but yeah, Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, like 11:50.
Masquerade party, educational stuff, cosplay, just all sorts of fun things like that. Great value. The con is 3 days for $65, which is tremendous. We talked about Silicon Valley a couple weeks ago that we attended, and much pricier, almost that price just for 1 day there. 1 day for Saturday at WonderCon is $30, so you're getting a really great deal. A lot of action kind of packed into those days as well. CCI is known obviously for a lot of value there, even with San Diego being much more pricey than that, around the $200 mark. I mean, you're getting so much entertainment, best value really in anything we do in entertainment for sure. And so great show all the way around. It was a different year in a lot of ways. We talked in the prep podcast and the prep visual guide and stuff about the theme really being Pack Your Patience, and I think that was consistent throughout our time here at WonderCon. There was definitely weird things. One of the things we talked about is it was important this year right away to adjust our thinking and look at it more as a new show called WonderCon Los Angeles or Los Angeles Comic Con, and not compare it to the last couple years at Anaheim, because I think that sets things up for disappointment, because there's a lot of things about it that were just different and for us not quite as good. In addition, they had the use of the RFID badges this year, which was interesting because then you had to tap in and tap out. There was some complications here and there with that, but I think they improved as the days went on, and it's interesting. I mean, in a lot of ways this is a test for San Diego Comic Con, so we'll see. At the end of the day, the RFID is the future for all of these bigger cons because it greatly reduces counterfeiting. It doesn't do anything to increase speed. That was something at Silicon Valley. They talked about it being quicker than flipping your badge around. I don't agree with that at all. But I do think it is something that probably is going to happen in a lot of cases just simply because a lot of people counterfeit, and it's a good way to reduce that. So let's talk about the floor a little bit. And before we talk about it, why don't we take you to the floor so you can check out some of the booths at WonderCon and see a little bit of the things that we saw there over the course of those 3 days.
What we call Superman gangbang. Whoa. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Hold it, hold it, hold it. Superman. There you go.
She's like, yeah, we can taste it. Mikey, are you ready to go?
Thank you very much.
Oh my God.
Shade. Shade. Shade.
Is that you can't look at the way the company is managed, you have to just look at the things out and
Star Wars celebration. We actually did the That's the first time we did WonderCon so far.
At where?
Oh yeah, well, Mike's the best anyway.
Tell me what to do.
All right, so hopefully that gave you a little bit of an idea of what type of floor it was. I mean, it's a big, solid floor filled with all different types of vendors, from comics and independent artists, authors, and then, you know, those big booths like the DC booth or things like that. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had a nice display. What were your impressions of the floor over the course of the few days?
The floor was good. I mean, it was good size. I thought there was a good variety of vendors. Definitely a lot of comics represented, comic books represented. Nice artist alley. It was big enough that it took us the 3 days to go through it. We couldn't get through it in the first couple days because there was so much other stuff going on and things. But yeah, I thought it was a good floor. I mean, obviously we got several things and picked up several things along the way. So yeah, good floor. As far as I guess we're not comparing it to Anaheim because, as we said, it's kind of a completely different thing. But I guess kind of similar to Anaheim,
I think the vendors are pretty similar. And so let's talk in a little detail. As you said, we've got things out here. Let's start off talking a little bit about exclusives and swag. These are things that a lot of conventions don't have. Obviously, at San Diego Comic-Con, they are a huge part of the show. And at WonderCon, they've always been kind of a part of the show, not necessarily huge. Graffiti Design there had their usual WonderCon shirts and their DC kind of linked inspired WonderCon programming shirts. We picked up one of, I think, our favorite stops really at the con was over at the Disney Music Emporium, which I didn't count on that necessarily being part of our convention, but it was fun. And we picked up this BB-8 vinyl record, which has a couple songs from Star Wars The Force Awakens on it. Limited edition of what, 1,500?
1,500, and it's a Disney Music Emporium exclusive, not a WonderCon exclusive.
Yeah.
But still really cool. It's numbered. We have 207 of 1,500.
Yeah.
And so yeah, on side A it has March of the Resistance, and side B it's Ray's theme.
Yeah.
So.
And they had all kinds of cool stuff in the display there. Hopefully you check that out as we took you for the tour on the floor, though. But that was a neat one there.
Well, it was also neat because we picked up, with the purchase, we got a WonderCon exclusive poster thing.
Yeah, so these came exclusive with purchases at the booth, and in addition to that, they had without need of purchase for Star Wars The Force Awakens with the Blu-ray coming out and the deleted scenes, this really cool poster with Kylo Ren looking through the Millennium Falcon, which was one of the big deleted scenes from the movie. And then we're not going to unroll it, but also a full-size Star Wars The Force Awakens John Williams. It focuses on the great composer, and so that was a neat little additional grab there. In that vein, in terms of some of the freebie grabs too, I mean, the DC booth had their typical giving away free comic book days and free samplers and things like that. Back to Disney Music Emporium, they had some Captain America coasters. The program for WonderCon and San Diego Comic-Con, always awesome. Great stuff, Jason Fabok there. And then over at the Nickelodeon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle display, they had, you could get one of each of the masks for the turtles, so you can get your own little cosplay going on there. And then probably my favorite piece of swag, I'm guessing one of my favorites for all of 2016 and maybe for many years, attended the DC Rebirth press conference, which was open to media and then to about 200 attendees. But everybody that was in attendance got DC donuts and then got this autographed DC Rebirth Jim Lee print, which is awesome to get a Jim Lee, actually really autographed, yeah. And so that was really cool as well there. But yeah, there's a variety of types of exclusives, not anything that for me or for you that we were gonna line up super early and battle our way in. We know a few people did, and there were some challenges there. Again, with the RFID, it was kind of hit and miss in terms of how it was processing. Definitely had the greatest issues in the mornings when you had a glut of people trying to get in. We actually talk about that a lot more on the podcast, so if you wanna check that out, our WonderCon wrap-up, you can hear all the details of kind of the ebb and flow of that.
Yeah, and I saw Funko in the mornings had a really long line, but fortunately, in my opinion, we don't collect Funko, so I don't know what those exclusives were. I don't know what we missed out on, but Funko is just always kind of messy at San Diego, especially, and so I I assume it was cool stuff because there were
Well,
people lined up.
Yeah, and some of our friends that are dealers and, some would call scalpers, they had their, several boxes and stuff, so I'm sure we could look it up easily on eBay
Oh,
what
yeah.
it was. But yeah, good point. I mean, obviously, if you can avoid exclusives, it always brings the stress level way down. If you can avoid signings, if you can avoid those big popular panels. But obviously, at the other end, sometimes those are what make the con. And so there was some, some of those are, some of our best memories are some of those parts of conventions over the years. But this year, WonderCon, it wasn't really a focus for us, and so that brought at least that stress down a little bit, which we have a lot of stress at WonderCon. It's one of the conventions I think that we're the busiest. There's a lot of people that we have as readers or listeners or friends that attend the show, so there's a lot of other stuff going on as we're trying to run around and podcasts and video and, put up over 60 or something like that snippet videos on our YouTube channel, so you can check out all that. But it's just a busy con, so it was nice not really messing too much with those things and be able to keep that. Now, talking more about the floor, comics were really the thing to me. That was like the headlines for this con, which is interesting because in 2016, comics have not played as big of a role in the cons we've attended. Just for whatever reason, they've been a little bit more overpriced at most of them, a little bit less selection, etc., etc. And this con, lots of selection, tons and tons and tons of comic dealers, great prices, whether we're looking at wall books, bin books, Silver Age and Bronze Age really dominating a lot of things. We picked up first appearance, Batmite and Detective Comics. I mean, we pick up reader copies. None of them are ever going to be, any high scoring CGC books, but picked this up for $40, which was a good deal. 1959 issue 267. Picked up a bunch of $2 books. That are, things like Captain America 132 and Nick Fury Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. #6 and, things like that. Tales of Suspense 75. Again, all reader copies. Green Lantern 130, all reader copies. None of them, again, not that we're going to have CGC'd and try and flip them or anything like that, but just good deals. And it was fun. I mean, one of the things about comic bins, and I know you've even said that before, even though you're not the one really looking for very specific books or anything like that, but it's almost like a therapeutic thing at a con to just kind of jump in the bins and look around. And that was, to me, a highlight actually of the weekend, was having time. It was weird as we got to the latter part of Saturday to realize basically at that time pretty much all we had purchased outside of the BB-8 and one little figure we'll talk about here was basically comics and trades. Also, dollar bins, Pulp Fiction was there. We're big fans of Pulp Fiction. They're usually at the Long Beach shows that we go to. They're out based in Long Beach. Also, you can find them online at cheapgraphicnovels.com, but they have all of their trades for the most part are 40% off, which is awesome. But then on top of that, they bring to the con sometimes just bins and bins full of dollar books. So just picked up a lot of very recent books within the last couple months that they came out. Grabbed a bunch of the action figure variants for Secret Wars just because I'm not a variant collector, but I just thought at $1 a piece that was really fun and kind of cool there.
Well, they had a really nice sized booth this time.
Yeah,
The
huge
last
for
several
them.
cons we've seen them have been much smaller, where they almost only have had like a table of the trades and none of the just single issue books. But yeah, they had a nice booth this time. So
Yeah, it really felt like just the comic dealers in general had space and a lot of stuff to put in the space, and then good prices. And it was really weird again because WonderCon in San Diego usually aren't necessarily cons that we hunt comic books, because usually the booth prices are a little bit higher than a lot of other places like a Shrine show or something like that, or and so as a result the books just usually aren't the best price for con vets like us that can have opportunities multiple times to go, or to go out to a place like Frankenstein. But that was different this weekend, and that was really nice.
On the map and on the floor, basically, they did have a section just, what was it, bronze and silver? Or silver?
What did they call it? Like Silver Age or something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
something
specific
like
to that. So they were all kind
Yeah,
of
they
nice
staked a claim.
congregated, and it was probably good for us as the consumer because it was competitive pricing.
Yeah.
So.
Valiant was there. Every time Valiant's there, we pick up a tray. So picked up another Quantum and Woody there. Really love that book. Love the stuff Valiant does. As I said, DC had a really nice booth there. Lots of signings, cool stuff on display there. A lot tying into Batman versus Superman and Suicide Squad now with the cinematic universe. Image had a big booth there. Skybound, a lot of cool displays. Aspen, Top Cow, and so it's always nice to have the the publishers there on our circuit. usually we don't see, actually we really don't see DC except for San Diego and WonderCon, and that's nice. And Marvel, we only see it San Diego, so it's always nice to see them, see what things they have on display. Picked up Preacher, a hole in my reading over the years. For whatever reason, never got around to reading Preacher, and obviously with the TV series coming out now, it's a good time to make sure to do that. So comics, to me, a highlight of the show. Definitely that, and maybe some of those freebies. In terms of the toy scene, the new toys were fairly competitive priced, but nothing amazing. Prices were not as good as Silicon Valley from a couple weeks ago, or really most of the shows we've been to. Not that they were bad, but you know, your Marvel Legends all hovering around 20 to 30, except for maybe a Spider-Gwen, which we didn't even see, but you know, Taskmaster going for 30 or things like that. Star Wars The Force Awakens, DC Collectibles, all of those about that $25, $30 range. So nothing really great there, which is why I didn't really buy anything there. On the vintage side, there was probably about 4 or 5 dealers that had a decent amount of vintage. We did pick up a Superpowers Calabac, which is a really yellowed bubble there, and you know, not the best shape, but it was 20 bucks and a nice little addition to the collection. Hopefully it stays on the card there, it doesn't totally dissolve. Picked up a couple old classic 7-Eleven Slurpee cups back from the 70s there, Dr. Fate and Silver Surfer and Mephisto. Those are fun. And then, you know, as we've talked about on the con circuit, more and more are the crafty people with all of their, you know, really fun and cute t-shirts and wallets and necklaces and earrings and stuff. And so I picked up a Hal Jordan Green Lantern wallet made out of actual real comics, and that was kind of fun there. And there's a good presence of kind of that artist alley and small press and just independent artists, independent creators there, I'd say, in terms of just the toys, the crafts, the clothes, the shirts. Stylin' Online was there with a big booth. I wish superherostuff.com was there because I like them quite a bit, but they were not there. But just a good variety. I feel like anything that somebody wanted in that pop culture realm, you could probably find somewhere on the floor.
Yeah, and myself, I didn't, not enough really caught my eye. I didn't
Are you
really,
sure?
well, I mean, no, that's the only thing, but as far as the crafty stuff, it usually catches my attention, and there was great stuff, but nothing that I was completely drawn to and compelled to buy. Just my Fat Rabbit Farm WonderCon exclusive shirt with BB-8
Rabbit
and Kylo Ren.
Kylo Ren, yeah.
So that's I think pretty much the only purchase I made of anything. But I just wasn't in a buying mood, I guess, and nothing, like I said, was too unique that I had to grab. So.
Yeah. Well, let's move from that and talk a little bit about some of the guests, because obviously guests are a big part of a convention there. There was a lot going on in the panel rooms. Programming was awesome. I mean, really, I would say since WonderCon has been in Southern California, it was the best year of programming and the best year of guests we've seen. So why don't we take you real quick to a couple of the panel rooms so you can see some snippets, just see a little bit of how the rooms are set up. We do have to note the Microsoft Theater, which is kind of the big, if we want to call it Hall H equivalent at WonderCon, no video allowed and only photos from a certain area there. Now, some people, you know, aren't following those rules, and that's fine. We play by rules. We figure, especially representing the press, we always follow the rules of whatever the convention has. But that was disappointing. We found out about that the night before the convention, and it drastically changed, because a lot of times we will see extra panels that we may not be 100% into, because we know our listeners or viewers are into it and want to see that video. And so once they pulled the plug on that, that changed it. Also, the DC Rebirth panel that I went to, our press conference, whatever you want to call it, they announced when we got there, everybody had their video cameras set up, and they announced right like 2 minutes before it started that they weren't allowing any video, that you would have to go to their website and use their streaming service or whatever for people at home. So in general, I think our panel footage is a little bit less than normal. That said, though, let's take you to those panel rooms so you can get a little bit of a feel for it.
In that case, it's all about counting. And R2 and 3PO sing a counting song because Big Bird can't get his numbers straight. And C3PO thinks, if you go 1, you go beep, and R2 beeps. If it's 2, you go, and R2 goes beep, beep. And we go through this a few times and help kids learn to count by beeping. The R2 in love sequence was he falls in love with a mailbox. Sesame Street sent me a lot of scripts to approve, and I actually had to reject several. They did one where, instead of this counting thing, which is beep, 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 they wanted to sing the alphabet song. I said, no, R2 can't talk. And they said, oh no, but we could use a synthesizer. And when it's A, he could go A, and then or B, he could go B. And I said, no, if he can make A, B, C sounds, he can talk. And we can't have him knowing how to talk, so we had to cut through stuff like that. Okay, so that was going on. Yeah, you're right. This is the beat song because he's dancing. Archie was not the best dancer. You should see his tango. It's awful. Can't get the leg movement. And now Big Bird has figured it out. It's funnier without the sound.
So today, what we're going to do is talk about a brand new attraction that is a permanent attraction. And I should make that distinction here, because if you've been to Horror Nights, you know what we do for Horror Nights. We create these very highly elaborately detailed mazes, but no matter how detailed they are, they're still temporary. We set them up. Usually they're in a tent. We tear them down as soon as the event's over. This is very, very, very different and very exciting. What we're going to be doing is we're creating a permanent attraction that's going to be open year-round, based on The Walking Dead. And so today I think what we'd all like to do is talk to you a little bit about that attraction, explain some of the differences of what's different about a permanent attraction versus what you might have seen in the past at Halloween Horror Nights. We're not going to give away every detail, because I hate spoilers. You watch The Walking Dead, I'm sure you hate spoilers. Usually, like when things are really busy, I fall behind on the show, and I have to avoid social media altogether, as I know a lot of you do, because I don't want to know what's happened.
Also, part of horror, and to scare you guys, is a surprise, right? And that's what we do, is we set stuff up as you guys walk through specific rooms, if you guys been to Halloween Horror Nights, and it's a surprise of what happens. So that's a big part of it. I know for myself, want to keep as much as we can, hidden and as a surprise. And honestly, there's going to be some stuff in there that you're going to go, how did they do that? And we want to do that. That's the cool part of this too.
So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a feel. I mean, the nice thing about these Comic-Con International shows, whether it's WonderCon or San Diego's, these are nice, beefy, huge rooms with great resources, nice big screens. Even the smallest rooms are better than a lot of conventions have for their bigger rooms. So you always get top-notch setups for these panel rooms. Guest list, I mean, it was expansive. When you talk about the DC Rebirth panel, I mean, they had basically all the biggest names from DC right now. You had Jim Lee and Jeff Johns and John Romita Jr. and Dan Didio and Scott Snyder, and the list goes on of all of those guys there. On the Marvel side, even though Marvel didn't have much of a presence there, you did have Brian Michael Bendis there, as well as a number of other talents that work at Marvel. You had Legends of Tomorrow doing a panel for that WBDC side. You had Orphan Black, the Men of Orphan Black, really there in terms of cast. iZombie, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, it was a good, solid list. Over on the park side, this is Con Talk. On the park side, I mean, John Murdy and Chris Williams there representing Universal Studios Hollywood, talking about the new Walking Dead attraction, year-round attraction there. So, I mean, I felt like we had a lot of options, and sometimes Saturday afternoon in particular, it was like we had like 5 things at the same time. Screenings with Teen Titans versus Justice League, Lego Scooby-Doo screening. I mean, just a lot of fun stuff from morning to night in terms of panels. I was really impressed with the guests, and I was really impressed with the panels. To me, the only downside of it was the Microsoft Theater being so limited there, and additionally, the RFID just kind of sucked some of your drive. I mean, it was such a walk from the exhibit hall to Microsoft Theater. We're talking probably about a 15-20 minute journey. Then you got to tap in, tap out. What if your RFID doesn't work, which was happening for some people? Then you get there, maybe a long line there. They weren't allowing cosplay, swords, and weapons in there. Not that that was a problem for us, but there's a lot of kinks in between getting from the exhibit hall to the Microsoft Theater. So that was a bit of a downer. Expect that not to be an issue next year as WonderCon moves back to Anaheim, though.
All right. Yeah, the panels were great, and it was just frustrating that Microsoft was such an issue to get to, and had their own rules that we needed to follow, which was different than everything else, because there were several panels that were going on over there that if we had been in Anaheim, we would have just strolled into the arena and been fine, and that just wasn't the case. We really had to think about it, which meant all of Friday and Saturday we didn't even make it over there because we didn't want to deal with the extra pressure of getting over there and
Right.
dealing with everything. But very enjoyable panels, ones that we did do, and sounds like lots of the other ones that were going on that we didn't make it to were great too. So
Yeah.
good in regards to panels.
Yeah, and then outside of that, I mean, great cosplay scene. I mean, we've really come to expect that from most of our Southern California cons of any sort of decent size. LA Convention Center has been a great home to that. I mean, Anime Expo and Kamikaze have been epic in terms of their cosplay, and WonderCon was no different. I could spend hours out there taking photos and video, because there's so many talented, interesting mashups that are out there and stuff. So really fun weekend. Who should go to WonderCon? Well, I think this is a con. This is, to me, the, you know, maybe the best example of a con that's for everyone. This is really friendly to families, really friendly to comic collectors, really friendly to the Hollywood crowd. You know, it's not the scale of something like San Diego, which is so intimidating in terms of its scope and size, and just in its preparation, San Diego is so intimidating. This isn't on that level, so it's nice. It's really open, I think, to everybody, and it's a good, you know, in a way, it's almost a good starter con for some people, because there's definitely something there for everyone, and it's one of those things where you can go with a group of 20 people and everybody split up and go opposite ways and come back together and have lunch or things like that. Lots of great resources there in terms of food options and drink, much more so than I actually expected going into it. They did a really good job of just maxing out every food and drink option inside the convention center, and then with the food trucks amplifying those services. They were still all packed, but they really did a good job of kind of all hands on deck for it. So although I'm glad it's going back to Anaheim, I think there was a lot of different areas that they stepped up their game to, you know, deal with a con that was a little bit difficult for everybody, because as tough as it was on maybe attendees at LA Convention Center, obviously much more difficult for exhibitors and the staff of Comic-Con International that puts on the entire show.
Yeah, but you probably, I mean, if you are interested in more specific conversations about it, you know, listen to the podcast that we are putting up.
Yep.
Put up. By the
By
time
this
this
time it's
airs,
up, yeah.
we would have already gotten it up.
Yeah.
Because we go into more depth, and there was more discussion to be had and stuff, more specifics to different issues and
Yeah.
things. But
Overall, good.
yeah,
Good.
definitely.
And when will it be back? Well, it won't be back at the LA Convention Center next year, or at least if it is, it won't be as WonderCon. So WonderCon is returning. They announced it via their programming guide that it'll be back same time last weekend of March in 2017 and back in Anaheim. So I know we're excited about that.
But it's not Easter weekend.
But not Easter weekend for the first time in a while. So that's a little bit of a difference. So keeping the same time, yet a little bit different in ways. So for more information on WonderCon, you can follow along. We've got years worth of coverage of it on our website. Obviously, as you said, we've got a podcast dedicated to it where we go into much more specific talk about it as well. And hopefully you've enjoyed some of this video, as well as you can head over to our YouTube channel with tons and tons of snippet video to give you a real feel of what it is. And then obviously head over to comiccon.org where you can find all the information on WonderCon 2017 as it's posted for next year. So, all right, let's throw it back to the rest of our con talk. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed that look and that little time travel with us back to WonderCon. Obviously, we'll see what the future holds for that great show. It is another one of those shows that we really enjoy, and a little sad that we don't have a con of that type of size in April or May, really, this year. It'll really be Phoenix Comic Con. It's kind of the next one that we have on that scale, but it's a great show, a lot of fun there. And let's go ahead and wrap things up then and go to our next segment.
Okay, so up next we have our segment that we call Con Tips. This is where we bring you tips to help improve your future con-going experiences. Sometimes our tips are going to be kind of generic, kind of general, just con tips, and other times they're going to be more specific to a specific convention. This time, though, we're going to be speaking more broadly than we normally do, actually. And this is really related to a top tip related to any conventions, which is evaluating the opportunity costs.
Definitely. And this came about, actually, this was a change in our script just a few days ago because this was a cool week. In the week, we were asked to get interviewed by KPCC, the radio station and website, to talk D23 Expo, and then was asked by Mousetalgia, a really great Disney podcast, focuses a lot on the history. They bring all sorts of Disney legends. If you're not familiar with them and you're a Disney fan, definitely check out their podcast. But they wanted to just talk con tips because they're like, more and more Disney is in the realm of conventions now. It used to be just, D23 Expo, Disney Animania, things like that. And now you're having every convention, including something like Silicon Valley Comic Con, has a lot of Disney tie-ins. So they asked me to do a top 10 list, and I took all of our lists from all the cons, because after every convention, you guys don't know this, but we always end our conventions making notes as to the things that we need to remember for next year. And then we have our general convention tips. So it's kind of interesting. This is the first time that I've actually put together like a top 10. And so not that it's like my definitive all-time top 10 list. I mean, we'll say I'd have to put more thought into that. But I did come up with a top 10 list. And my number one, though, really when I thought about it, is really about opportunity cost. And something you and I talk about all the time is, I even wrote a few articles back when I first started covering San Diego Comic-Con about like these math formulas of how to determine how to use your time there. And it really all comes down to opportunity cost, which is the idea that if I do A, I can't do B or C or D or E or F, G, And I think the best example I can think of is Saturday for us last year, is we're driving down to San Diego Comic-Con. The plan is to go for whatever exclusive thing, run around the floor. I mean, for me, the greatest joy of Comic-Con is just running around the floor with no agenda. That's by far the best. And we've got whatever exclusives done, panels, whatever. So that was kind of the plan Saturday to a certain extent, I think. And we got down there. You dropped me off to park so I can go jump in line. And it was like 7 a.m. and the line for Hall H seemed doable. And it was on the backside of the convention center, but it seemed doable. And we thought, well, did Star Wars on Friday wear everyone down? Because people were there for like 48 hours to get into that. This seemed like it might be a possibility. If we get in, WBDC, Batman vs. Superman, Suicide Squad, Deadpool, X-Men, Warcraft. I mean, a whole day. And we had planned, and we figured we could get into the nighttime, the DC TV stuff. So we were definitely going to do that. But the daytime stuff was never part of the plan. And so I got into line. You joined me. We waited. We were one of the last, 100 or so people, probably a couple hundred people to get in. And then we got in. And now it's like we're in Hall H. And now it felt like we couldn't leave because now Quentin Tarantino's coming up. Now Daniel Radcliffe's coming up. Now Joss Whedon's coming. And it was an amazing day. And I think about it, every time I think about San Diego Comic-Con for this year, I think about if we have that choice again, what would my vote be? And I'm not sure, because as much as I love that, as much as there were so many memorable moments, it was huge for us on YouTube. We had a couple 100,000 views within a few days just of YouTube videos there. I kind of miss that we lost a whole day of just running around the floor and doing random things. And so obviously San Diego Comic-Con is a massive scale convention, but whether it's D23 Expo or Claremont Comic Show, these tiny little shows too, is anytime you choose to do one thing, you have to let something else go. And I think that becomes a really big thing as you're planning these bigger cons, and in all cons, but these bigger cons, because it's a lot of times I think people will focus on panel conflicts, and that makes sense. But there's also the outside stuff. There's also having lunch with your friends. There's also checking out cosplay and shopping and exclusives.
Resting so that one doesn't go crazy.
Yeah. So I think the tip really here is just understanding that the number one, if we're going to say that you got to this convention using potentially vacation time or maybe just your day off or whatever, so you're using time off, which is very valuable because it's time you could be working and making money. So that's valuable all on its own. Once you're there, really your commodity, the only commodity you have is time, and it's how you spend that time. And so another one of the tips I threw out there, which kind of relates, is just using time to reflect on how the show is going. And you and I are pretty big on taking breaks and say, okay, what do we need to do? Let's replan things the night before. What are we going to do? But point being, because you want to be aware that if I go this way, it just means I can't go this way. In the end, we're always going to miss things, but understanding that every choice kind of has that consequence to it. And then at the end, I think you just want to be happy with what those choices were, and if you pick a panel and you put a bunch of time into that panel and then it's a dud, I don't think you want to feel like it was a failure because it wasn't your fault that it was bad. Now we're getting, I guess, a larger philosophical sense here, but it's like you made a plan, you stuck to the plan. If it didn't work out, the other times it will work out though. But I think opportunity cost is a big thing. And so since we talked a lot about it, or at least a bit about it on Nostalgia, I thought that would be a good one to kind of focus on for this week. And also because we have such a San Diego Comic-Con focus just with the way the news kind of rolls out.
Right, yeah, I mean, trading in the time, and with something like San Diego, because there's so much going on, it's relatively easy to set up your backup plan and your backup plan and your backup plan, and
that was also another one of my Nostalgia tips.
That might be why it was so fresh in my mind, because I listened to that
Right.
podcast today. But having at San Diego, it's easy to have those backup plans because there's so much stuff going on. But even on the smaller cons, you still need to weigh out what the cost is to do X or Y or skip Y, or whether it's, do I go across the street and sit down and have a nice lunch with friends? What am I giving up? Well, I'm giving up time on the floor. I might miss a panel. Lunch might go long. Or do we stay on the floor and just eat convention food? I mean,
right.
So it applies across the board. Just always, but be knowledgeable and mindful, I guess is a better word, of what you're giving up and what is at stake at every not every turn, but on the big turns is a
Right.
good thing to have on the forefront of your mind.
Yeah, and again, to keep it all in perspective, I'm really big on the idea of not putting more importance on any of these topics than is true in the real world. So there's always kind of this disclaimer of everything that we talk about on Parks and Cons are small picture things relative to the big picture. I can't stand when I listen to podcasts or, social media, I see things where it's like people try, this isn't community service, it's not finding a cure for cancer, it's not any of that. None of these things are that important as, health or family or any of that. That being said, obviously, it is all about entertainment, and I think what we try to do is bring you guys entertainment, and really the focus, kind of our thesis back from the origin was trying to help you enjoy your experiences more. That's why we do something like Con Talk. And so when you look at that, I think then, it really does get to the fundamental core of the stuff we talk about. Is the best tip we could give you for that time is to, understand that that's your day off, or that's your half day off, or that's your vacation week, or whatever it is, and really just think about the choices to make sure that you have an optimal good time. Is make sure your steps are planned out, and that you don't regret any of the options. You just make those plans, and then you go with it, and you understand that no matter how small the con is, in most cases, I'm not going to be able to do half of it. In a case of San Diego, you can't even do 1% of it because it's just so much there. And that's just, you understand that, you accept that, and you move on from that. So, all right, so I think this is a good place to wrap up this episode of Con Talk. So why don't you tell the people where they can find you?
You can reach me directly on Twitter at Connoisseur, which is CON_NOISSEUR. Of course, I help monitor our social media, so you can find us at Parks and Cons on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Periscope, YouTube, Stitcher, and iTunes.
Yeah. And you can find me on Twitter at _con_fluence, the Confluence, and in those places, and again, across the social media platforms. If you're interested in theme parks, check out on this same channel, we have every other week our Park Talk. So we alternate Park Talk and Con Talk. So we go back and forth with the goal of 2 Con Talks and 2 Park Talks each month. So do check that out. The best way you can do that is by subscribing to this channel. Please do that. It's a big goal for us in 2016 is to increase subscribers. So please do that. In that same vein, please tell your friend if you know anybody that's interested in conventions, San Diego Comic-Con, for example, WonderCon, or any of the theme park stuff, let them know about us. At WonderCon, somebody came up to me and said that they had just come across our visual guide for WonderCon and watched one of their shows, and so then they subscribed and saw, oh, there's all this stuff on Knott's and Disneyland, and they're like, I'm into all that stuff, and I'm like, that's awesome, because a lot of the stuff we do, we know it's segmented, as some people are into the horror element, some are into the Comic-Con element, Disney, whatever. But definitely subscribe, and that way you can kind of keep up with all of the stuff that we have there.
And on YouTube, I strongly suggest that you use the playlists if you're only interested in one aspect or another, because obviously we just look at the list of videos. There's
overwhelming.
A lot.
Yeah.
But if you go to the playlist, we're pretty good and pretty timely about getting everything into those playlists, so you can just pull up the playlist you're interested in and don't need to go through everything else to find your stuff that you're interested in.
And with more in-depth talk, you can always check us out on iTunes and Stitcher. We do Parks and Cons, a podcast there that is at least weekly, Many times it's twice a week or sometimes even 3 times a week. So you can check us out there, iTunes, Stitcher, Parks and Cons. As we said before, social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Periscope, all of them, Parks and Cons, really easy to find us, and that's where we really do take you to the heart of the action, everything in real time, so that we're able to share it with you as it's happening in the moment. So, okay, we're going to wrap up here for this episode of Con Talk. Until next time, we'll see you in line somewhere.